Jude's I'm so good.
We have so many awesome listener questions. First off is by Nicholas Schaefer, Patreon of the podcast. Thank you, Nick.
What's up, Nick?
He says, what is your favorite Spock and Bones moment? I'm gonna defer to you because I don't have a lot of knowledge about the original series.
Wow, this is the wrong question to ask for this podcast because Matt's the one who would...
Matt Vader?
Yeah, Jude doesn't know anything about Star Trek.
No, you don't know.
I'm not a big original series fan. But I think that it's got to be, are you out of your Vulcan mind? That's just the quintessential Bones-Spock relationship summed up.
I think, for all the failings that JJ did with his reboot movies, I think the relationships between the characters were pretty spot on.
I actually thought that the best Spock-McCoy moment from the Bad Robot movies was in the third one where they're kind of stranded on the planet together and Spock's injured and Bones has to take care of him. And there's this one moment where it looks like they're going to get captured or killed. And Bones kind of comes to grip with okay, we're going to do this together. And then Spock gets beamed away and Bones is just like, God damn it. He's like, I'm going to die alone. It was a really good moment. The whole third, Star Trek Beyond, the whole third Bad Robot movie was, Star Trek Beyond, that whole movie I feel was the most authentically Star Trek of the Bad Robot films.
Really? Even with
the Beastie Boys song.
Yeah, the Beastie Boys song in the middle of the battle?
Well, it was because the interactions among the crew just felt really like it was in the original series, whereas the previous two movies, they were more like the Spock Kirk show, whereas with the third one, everyone kind of got their own little subplot, and it just felt like watching an original series episode. So that's probably my favorite of the Bad Robot.
This might not be popular with the circle of nerds that we're kind of in, but I really did enjoy JJ's take on the Star Trek movies. I thought they were a lot of fun, and I enjoyed them.
They weren't Star Trek, though.
They were very much more action-oriented, but so were the Next Generation movies. They were always more action-oriented.
Yeah, but everyone hated those, too.
I liked them.
The thing was JJ... He never understood Star Trek, and so he tried to turn it into Star Wars.
And then he did Star Wars, and he didn't get that right either. But Star Trek 2009 and Star Trek Into Darkness, I thought that they were both decent movies, but they just weren't very good Star Trek movies, in my opinion. I liked them. Anyway, the next fan question we have is from Price of Reason. What's up, Price? Thank you very much.
What's up, Price?
The penis doll?
The penis doll? The Admiral Akbar doll with
Admiral
the crown.
Ack penis?
Just stop making fun of his freaking avatar.
Somebody say penis.
Jude's
perking
what?
All right, Jude, you can check out because this is another Star Trek thing.
I think she should be the one to answer this.
How about if I read them?
You want to read them?
That way I'm a part of it. Because I have zero to say.
It's the penis doll one.
After the failure in Star Trek franchise in recent years, why don't they just let Quentin Tarantino make the R-rated Star Trek movie he's always wanted to make? Ooh, good question.
I think I would have...
Star Trek is not rated R, and that's one of the big reasons why people are pissed at Picard and Discovery right now, is because they're trying to do that R-rated thing. I'd rather that they let Tarantino just do Has
Tarantino said he wanted to do Star Trek?
Yes.
I thought he was into Star Wars.
No, he's a Star Trek guy.
Oh, really? Oh,
and he's been wanting to do a Star Trek movie for a long time.
Okay.
But the thing is I just feel like, let him do kind of what they did in Black Mirror, where they do their own version of Star Trek that's not really Star Trek. Let him do that.
Like an Orville Dark?
Yeah, just let him. It's obviously Star Trek, but it doesn't have the Star Trek name attached to it. Let him do that, because if he were to get his hands on actual Star Trek, I just feel like it would hurt the franchise.
See, I would agree with you, and I do agree with you in principle. Star Trek should not be that. And that's why one of the reasons why I don't like Discovery and Picard is because they've gone R. They've gone too hard. It's not what it's supposed to be. So I've always been against Tarantino being part of Star Trek because I'm like, he doesn't fit the bill. He's not going to fit into this universe. It's not going to make any sense. But now that they've kind of changed the whole formula and they've gone that direction, I don't see how it can damage it any more than they already have. So why not?
It could. I mean, they would. It would be a good, an interesting project, but it would just further alienate, I think, the Star Trek faithful. Like, Jude, you saw the Black Mirror episode where they kind of lampoon Star Trek. And I feel like that would kind of be closer to what we'd see from a Tarantino
the one where he was kidnapping people in the virtual reality thing?
Oh, I liked that.
Yeah.
That was a good episode.
So, like, I feel like that would be something kind of more up Tarantino's alley where he could have his own characters in his own universe and play around in that instead of, like, having to kind of co-opt the, like you know, if you give Tarantino Kirk or Picard or something like that, he'd make something interesting, but it wouldn't be, I guess, a good entry into the franchise.
I think it would be worth seeing a script, though.
Yeah, I don't know if I would give him legacy characters like that. I would definitely have him make his own characters.
Well, if he could do his like own ship and his own characters and stuff like that, that might be something different. But I personally, like, I want to see a return to the very optimistic and hopeful Star Trek with no cursing, no graphic violence, no sex, just like, you know, like, interesting puzzles, great sci-fi scenarios, and, you know, philosophical questions and things like that.
Pleasantville Star Trek.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, like,
That's a good reference.
Classic Star Trek.
Classic Star Trek.
You know, so I would rather see, you know, CBS get back to that type of Trek rather than try to go even further dark and edgy.
I noticed some people on Twitter had given you some pushback, and in my opinion, valid pushback about Deep Space Nine kind of already pushing the envelope on like the dark and gritty version of that utopian future where there was actually still flaws and some of the characters weren't doing what the Federation was supposed to mean. Like, you responded to it, but go ahead and tell the listeners, like, what do you feel about that criticism of like, Star Trek has already gone in that darker direction with some of the other TV shows and some of the plot lines and some of the in the movies and whatnot. So this is just a newer, edgier version of that.
Well, the thing about DS9 was that, so the scenario was that you had the Federation coming into a situation in an area of space that was rife with conflict. And they were dealing with a lot of disparate alien races that didn't share their ideals. But the whole point of DS9 was to show that, okay, how does the Federation maintain its integrity and its ideals in the face of this type of darkness? So there was always that core message of, okay, there's hope there. There's a brighter future. And that's what they're working towards in the series. Even though they go in some dark places, they're always working towards the ideals that Star Trek kind of always held dear. And so you can do darker, more adult stories. But I mean, like, if you were to compare what DS9 did with what we've seen from Discovery and Picard, where you have Klingon titties and you have people dropping the F-bomb for no good reason, and you have people just cutting off heads and ripping out eyeballs in very long and protracted scenes. It's like DS9 didn't have to do any of that stuff, and they were still good. Mm-hmm. And, you know...
I think you made your point.
Well, so the long and short of it is that you can do dark and gritty Star Trek and still kind of have like a hopeful message to it. Whereas I feel like the current generation of Star Trek under Kurtzman, they're doing stuff just because they can do it and because they think it's something that's modern and edgy, as opposed to something that is more consistent with what the fans actually want. And that's why I wouldn't want Tarantino to, because if Tarantino were to do a Star Trek movie, it wouldn't be a Star Trek movie. It would be a Tarantino movie with Star Trek in it.
Yeah.
And I love Tarantino. In fact, Jude's like one of his biggest fans. And so like I'd be down to see a Tarantino Star Trek movie. But it would not be a movie that I felt would fit well within the franchise.
Neither do these shows. All right.